Thank you so much, Chief, for spending time with us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right, let's bring you up to date, everybody, with this case. It really is horrific. Christopher Hensley facing charges, including attempted second-degree murder. He's accused of throwing a rock that hit Deputy Dalton Swanger in the head. The incident was caught on camera during filming for the TV show On Patrol Live. We have a warning. The video you're about to see may be disturbing to some of you, but let's kind of walk you through what happened here, Greg.
All right, so you could see the video as they approach, and there's Officer Swanger after he had been struck by a rock, being moved to safety. And the video continues, and Lori will talk about this later, but we typically in a courtroom setting deal with body cams, dash cams, but in this case we have the camera footage from the show.
This is different.
On patrol, so very different. But this happened in real time on live TV.
You see the arrest there happening again. Christopher Hensley, Deputy Swanger, I want to let you know, is apparently showing some improvement, but he was badly injured. We're going to get into different facets of this case over the next half hour or so. But Chief, first, someone hurls a rock at an officer with such force, he suffered terrible injuries. What was your reaction when you heard this?
Well, anytime someone throws a missile at an officer, you never know what the outcome is going to be. But in this case, anytime you have a head injury, blunt trauma, it's the same as somebody hitting you over the head with a rock or a hard object. So, I mean, my heart goes out to that family and to the Knox County Sheriff's Office for his injury. I mean, because it ripples through the entire, not just the Knox County Sheriff's Office, but the entire law enforcement community. I've heard from officers all over East Tennessee since this happened.
And you remain in law enforcement to agree through the COPS program. You were involved in that on the federal level. Bring us up to date before we get more into this case on what you're doing now.
Well, after I came back from serving the last time at the Department of Justice as director of the COPS office, I just started doing some specific some consulting work that I'd been doing for the last 20 years, but I tried to limit the scope as my age was catching up with me. And so now I've done, a lot of expert witness work in my career, but a lot of policy analysis for state and federal organizations and stakeholder organizations in Tennessee and throughout the country.
And Lori, I'll just tell you,
Yeah.
in dealing with what I do for a living, Chief Keith is one of the most respected law enforcement individuals in the country. He's worked under two U.S. attorneys on the COPS program where he was a director, and we were fortunate to have him here in Knox County. But let me kind of put this tragic, and I want to say that our thoughts and prayers are with Officer Swanger and
Absolutely.
his family as well. But when you have a 911 call, often when I'm involved as a defense lawyer, people say, why does law enforcement have to make an arrest? Why does the primary aggressor have to be determined, have to go to jail? Why did so many people show up? Is this some indicia as why things are different in a domestic call?
Well, I think so. I mean, the 911 operator is that link between the person calling for assistance and the law enforcement officer in the field. And so they're traveling on the information that they've received. And if it's not articulated well, details are not provided, then that officer or officers walk into a scenario where they don't know all the facts and don't know the risk and the threat assessment. When you have limited information, it really increases the risk on potential violent cause like domestic violence. I mean, one of the most dreaded calls in law enforcement is a domestic violence call, because you get in a situation where you have combatants, you separate them, and the person that actually calls then turns on the police officer. So, I mean, the dynamic is just, there's anger in the home. You don't know what the background is. You're in somebody else's house. There's weapons involved, could be weapons involved, both, lethal gunfire, knives, as well as rock, stones, bottles, those kinds of things.
Just certainly a combustible situation. And before we talk about the ramifications of this being caught on camera, how that's different because it was a live TV show than dash cam or body worn cameras, let's talk about the charges this man is facing in this case. We talked about attempted second degree murder. That's just one of the charges.
Just one of the charges, attempted second degree murder. And second degree is a knowing killing of another. And as Chief Key said, when you're hit with a missile, it's interesting. There are 27 shades of gray between black and white. And there's a difference between throwing a rock at somebody, a small rock, and a rock that is large enough and is a deadly weapon. Courts have held that a rock, brick, cement block can and are deadly weapons. But he's charged with second degree, which it's an attempt, so that knocks it down a level from an A felony to a B felony, which would be 8 to 12 years with no probation. He's charged with aggravated assault, which is a C felony, 3 to 6 years on a first responder. He hit another officer with a rock. He's charged with domestic violence. He's charged with possessing a firearm to go armed. And based on these facts, they obtained a search warrant. Next day, go to his house, find a indoor hydroponic marijuana grow, a rifle, outdoor marijuana plants, led to more charges. But Lori, his bond is astronomical. And the purpose of bond under the Tennessee Constitution is to reasonably assure your appearance, but you factor in a lot of factors: danger to the community, prior record, dangerousness of the offense. But the magistrate set his bond at $2 million.
Chief, what does that say to you?
Well, it says that the judge's opinion is he's a danger to the public and certainly to law enforcement.
Absolutely. And, before we came on, you were talking about how things have changed, certainly, over the last 2 decades, if you will. And let's go back to your time as chief of Knoxville Police. And Greg and I were talking, we didn't remember an officer losing their life during your tenure. Let's talk about that and why you feel things have seemingly escalated over the years.
Well, yeah, almost 17 years as chief and not losing an officer is my greatest accomplishment. I've had a number of them injured, shot, but none killed. And I contributed a lot of that to our training. Our training staff did such a great job prepping them, getting them ready. And we try to make sure our officers do critical thinking, not just robotic behavior. So I think that was important. We gave them a lot of discretion. And it's the environment has changed so dramatically. When I was a rookie, I had a gun belt that had a weapon, a pair of handcuffs, and a nightstick. Today, these men and women go out with 40 pounds of gear on. That's nothing short of military combat. And they do that every day, whether it's 107 outside like today or, freezing. They go into nearly combat every day. So they have to be mentally prepared. And there's a lot of pressure on them for that because they know there's a likelihood they're going to be injured. Nobody takes this job not thinking you're not going to get injured.
And police departments and sheriff's offices everywhere are responding differently today than they did 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, part of it is the pendulum swung so far after the George Floyd incident that law enforcement backed away. So de-escalation, while it's a good thing, can be a bad thing because officers are more tolerant and they are forgiving. Some of the training, I think, is mistakenly giving the aggressor an advantage over the officer in some of the de-escalation steps that are being taken. So there's a lot of mix to it. I'm not casting doubts on de-escalation training. It's not all the same. It's not all tomato soup wherever you go, but it has changed. The narrative of anti-police, disrespect for police, whether it's from the media, newspaper, the television shows, just has changed the landscape dramatically.
And going back to television shows, this was all, as we said, and we showed you, captured on camera during the filming of the TV show that we talked about. What are the legal steps, Greg, that need to be taken here for a potential trial when it comes to this video and getting it into court?
That question is more layered and complex than one would initially think. Normally, we deal with dash cams and body cams, which are routinely, as the chief knows, saved. They're routinely provided in the context of a criminal case. But in this case, you have parallel videos that were filmed by a production company on patrol, which to me is reminiscent of the old show Cops. So the first thing I'm going to do if I'm the defense lawyer, not only will I issue a subpoena ducis tecum, which is a subpoena that compels you to bring a document, tangible objects, et cetera, to court, but I don't only want the footage that was on TV. I want the raw footage that may have been edited, that may have captured something else. And here is something that John Q. Public doesn't see behind the scenes. Typically, when you want raw footage from a company, WATE, a newspaper that did a video, you get pushback, and they say that it's part of our work product and covered by the press shield law. So what I see is if the lawyer's really astute and does his job, he just won't go to YouTube and download this video. He will want the video in its entirety, and typically production companies are reluctant to see what was edited, let the public see produced, etc. So that's going to be a battle that both the prosecution and the defense may have to face in this case.
Well, does the production company have power because it is their product?
The Tennessee Press, the press shield. So you're going to say, I have a First Amendment protection to this. And then that's why the man or woman in the robe make those decisions. The other thing that when you see a case that's captured live on television, you have publicity. You have people that watch this crime occur in their living room, and then now we're watching it occur again.
A lot of people
live,
have seen it.
and they're going to see it again. And once they find out that this was captured and this deputy was injured, it's going to get downloaded over and over. And so what you wind up having is the risk that the jury veneer is getting tainted and prejudiced by publicity that you normally wouldn't see with a body cam or a dash cam.
Chief, what do you think about that?
Oh yeah, I mean, Greg hit it right on the head. And when I look at a case from an expert witness perspective, I want to see all the footage. I don't want to just see what's been edited, because my eyes may see something different than the eyes that prepared the tape for me. And anytime you have cut video, that raises my suspicion. In any case, whether I'm working on a plaintiff or a defense side. So I want to see all the footage, and I want to sequence it together so I know exactly what took place.
All right. Let's hold that thought. We're going to toss to a break really quickly. But when we come back, we're going to talk about why the DA's office filed a motion for this suspect, Christopher Hensley, to prove his source of income. So stay with us. We'll be back. Welcome back, everyone. We are talking about a case that really has gripped our community. It happened last Saturday. We're talking about the man accused of throwing a rock at a Knox County deputy during a domestic disturbance call, critically injuring him. And right now, Deputy Swanger is apparently showing some improvement, but he was badly injured. So our thoughts and prayers go out to him right now. We'll keep you updated with how he's doing. Christopher Hensley facing attempted second-degree murder charges and more. As we mentioned, his bond set at $2 million. Here's the thing, Greg and Chief Keith, the DA's office also filed a motion for him to prove his source of income. This stems from a drug charge he's also facing after the discovery that you mentioned of about 150 marijuana plants at his home. So let's talk about how this plays into what they're trying to seek here.
Well, a bond source motion is typically filed by prosecutors in a narcotics case. Sometimes when you have, I've had it done in catalytic converter cases, but when there's a fear that someone's income is totally derived from and is the fruit of illegal activity. And what they don't want, and Chief can probably speak to this, you don't want to arrest somebody for selling drugs or doing this and then use the drug money to get out of jail and be right back where we were. So it's
Talk about a terrible cycle.
Well, it's a terrible cycle, and then if you're the defense lawyer, you've got to make sure that there's an arm's length process where someone can establish the money is not the product of illegal activity, and And then typically the judge hears the origin of the money or whatever. But that just goes to show in a case, and it happens when you have somebody that was lying in wait for law enforcement in a domestic with a firearm, with a projectile, they are going to make it legally as difficult as they can. And that's another indicia. So before you can get out of jail, one, a $2 million bond is a difficult financial hurdle to meet, first. Second, if you have the proceeds and you don't have really gainful employment, you're not a brain surgeon or work
You didn't
for
win the
Elon Musk.
lottery.
You didn't win the Powerball, then you've got to explain how you came up with 10 or 15% of $2 million that if you pay a bondsman, you don't get back, by the way. So that's just another layer to make it more difficult for someone to get out of jail. But when you see bond source, that means is a legal term for we think you've got a bunch of illegal money and you're not using it to get out of jail. What do you think, Chief?
Oh yeah, that was particularly popular in the 80s and 90s during the cocaine era, where these dealers had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, and they could make bond. That's why we took so many cases federally back in the 90s, particularly around cocaine, because there was just so much money on the table. They had, making $1 million bond was, making 10% of that was nothing for them.
Unbelievable.
Well, times have changed.
Yes, they have. They certainly have. And, I want to bring this up. I don't know. Another motion was filed to revoke Hensley's bond for a shoplifting charge in an unrelated incident in May. That is a minor charge compared to everything we're talking about. What is the prosecution trying to show?
But it's not
with
minor.
that?
And that, that's,
well, comparatively speaking,
why-
it's still terrible.
But why it's not minor, let's just say you're on shoplifting. You get probation, 11 months and 29 days. That's a year. So if they revoke you for picking up new charges, then you sit in jail. We don't have to worry about the bond source motion. And it's just basically a probable cause standard. Did you violate the terms of your probation? Well, I think attempting to kill an officer with a rock, having 150 marijuana plants, that hearing is going to be pretty quick and to the point. And then, you're stuck. We're not talking about a $2 million bond or a bond source hearing. So that's something that when we talk about the bond source, it sounds dramatic. 2 million sounds dramatic.
Right.
But really the most significant thing in the short term is the shoplifting charge that may be violated.
Interesting. Chief, this is probably not the first time you've seen something like that as far as the court cases and how they move through and try to get different motions.
Well, this is a public safety issue. And like Greg said, if you can get him on a shoplifting charge and violation and he's in jail, then the bond becomes a moot point.
Interesting. As this case moves forward, again, Deputy Swanger's future, frankly, is not known right now. We don't know the outcome. And I want to include a statement from Knox County Sheriff Tom Spengler, who said, the courts will see fit and what we need to have done to somebody who thinks it's a good idea to do something like that to one of our people. And as you said, Chief, and as we well know, the community, especially the law enforcement community, but the community at large, really tries to gather around and support this deputy and his family. What is your message to the community when things like this happen? And what can we all do just to respond in a positive way?
Well, I think the positive way is to show support, to the officer, to the deputy, and to the Knox County Sheriff's Office, to let them know that the community stands behind them. I have long said that law enforcement is the most important service provided in this country. Without law enforcement, all other institutions will fail. And so this is an attack on the public safety and the community's welfare. Anytime an officer is attacked, it's gotten to be such a, I don't know how to really describe it, such a deviant act where they're supposed to pull over when they see an officer on the side of the road, and they'll sometimes try to brush him. It's just this overall aggression and disrespect for law enforcement. And if law enforcement fails, every other institution is going to fail. So it's important for us as a community to number one is pray for his well-being and recovery, but to support these men and women that are out there. They're not all perfect. They make mistakes, but the vast majority, when you think about the number, just the sheer number of calls law enforcement responds to in this country, 7 million times a year, and how few of them end up in disasters or mistakes. It's a pretty good bet they're going to do the right thing.
Wow.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
One thing people can do as well, if you need to call 911, call 911. But if you call 911 and the police show up, not knowing what's behind that door, as the chief so articulately painted that picture, no, you're going to get treated, in a manner that's going to protect you. It's going to protect the officers, and it's not just, hey, it just got out of hand. We're sorry. Get out of my house, or disrespect the officers. So just know, when you are in a domestic situation, remember scenarios like Deputy Swanger, and that's why they conduct themselves in a professional, thorough manner, and the primary aggressor goes to jail, and there's a 12-hour cooling off period. So this unfortunately shows, if you need to call 911, call 911, but just know it is going to be a professional operation that comes to the door. It's not like Tom Selleck in Blue Bloods, where they come and say, it's you again, hey.
Which was a great show, by the way.
A great show. But as the chief said, if I'm a law enforcement officer, the last call I want to go to is a domestic.
Exactly. And, what you're saying is, hey, cooler heads prevail. But in these situations, that's almost impossible for some people to even comprehend.
Well, think about it. As Chief Key said, you go behind a door, and in Tennessee, I mean, how many guns are behind those doors? How many knives are in those kitchens? How you don't know what you're going to encounter when someone goes down the hall, goes to the restroom. Can I do this? So it's a very tense situation that unfolds in real time, and there's something awry, or they wouldn't have called 911 to begin with.
And Chief, back in the day, when you were out on the streets protecting and serving, you were injured. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, domestic violence calls are always concerns. It's I remember one of the domestic calls I answered early in 1971. I was still a young, untrained officer, and I knocked on the door just like anybody else would, standing right in front of the door. And fortunately, I had a senior officer who reached over and grabbed me, pulled me out of the way of the door, and the next thing I know, a shotgun blast came right through the door. So I got a warm up. Then I remember once being stabbed on a domestic violence call, and my sergeant was concerned enough that he asked me if I could finish the shift, and so that was part of our duty.
Wow.
Was to be there.
Sure.
And like Greg said, the last thing we want people to do is not call 911. If you need help, that's what 911 is for, is to get the type of assistance you need, whether it's law enforcement or fire service or medical. And these officers today are so much better trained than the days of my time. I was in a training class for 8 weeks, and when I retired, we were training officers for 26 weeks and then 18 months on a field training officer program. So that's a long time. 2 years of training is a lot better than 8 weeks. But it was rock and roll when I was a young man, because we just weren't trained as anywhere close to like they are today.
And now, as far as I know, we know, the media knows when an officer is injured. Back in the day, like you said, you went on about your job if you could.
Oh, it's almost like a hall of shame if you complained about being injured on a call. The officers wouldn't. I mean, if they got hospitalized, obviously they would. But if you got scratched up, or you got hit, struck, you'd shake it off, and you'd be right back into answering calls. So it wasn't reported very often. And again, nationally, you hear about officers killed and shot at or shot, but what you don't hear a lot about is the assault rates. because they go under the radar screen as far as the FBI reporting goes. And, only 44% of law enforcement agencies even report it to the FBI in death. So, they just don't comply with it. It's not mandatory. So,
What needs to change?
well, I mean, I think the reporting scheme needs to be set up more like fire service does. They report every injury, and which I think helps them in the long term, not just tactically but strategically, to know here are the kind of injuries they encounter during certain kinds of structure fires. And law enforcement, we don't do that as well. We don't. Our analytics and encouraging injury reporting is not as robust as the fire service is. It should be. And some agencies do that, but you can see that there's been this huge shift in the last 6 years, 8 years maybe, on officer wellness and mental health. There's a reason for those issues going on increasing, and that's because the pressure on these young men and women are out there, people looking over their shoulder. And again, sometimes they make mistakes, and sometimes it's intentional. That's unfortunate. But there's got to be a narrative change about how we respect those those that are trying to protect us.
All right, we're almost out of time, but let's bring it back around to Deputy Dalton Swinger, hit in the head with a rock by this person who's accused of doing it. And this person is Christopher Hensley, facing attempted second-degree murder charges and more. Bond set at $2 million. We've talked about the facets of this case, and we want to end it again with a special message to Deputy Swinger and his family that we just hope and pray he will recover from this and get back to being able to do what he felt he was called to do.
Thoughts and prayers are with you. And Chief Keith, we were honored to have you on the program. Good to see you, old friend.
Thank you. Good seeing you.
Thank you so much, Chief Phil Keith. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's it, everyone. Thank you for being with us. And we'll do a little bit more on this coming up at 5:30.
Let's do it.
We'll see you on the air then. Thanks, everyone.